welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Bajo.
And I'm Hex. November is a silly month, breeding games out of every nook and cranny, so we've been on a bender of game reviewing to bring you our thoughts.
Coming up, fans of plastic gaming peripherals get a new plaything with DJ Hero.
You can't touch this. You can't touch this.
And it's flying panda fur with the latest Tekken.
We catch up with the brain behind Dragon Age Origins. And we look at games that make you go spew, literally. But first, can you guess the game for this week? News time, Hex.
Good game.
First launched in 2003 as a competitor to the Game Boy Advance, Nokia's N-Gage mobile gaming system never really took off, with users complaining it was like playing with a hard plastic taco. A reworked version of the system eventually made its way to the Nokia smartphones, with the full service being offered from early 2008. Again, sales failed to match expectations, and Nokia has now announced it will no longer make games for the ailing platform and will shut down the N-Gage servers in September 2010. In early 2007, an American radio station thought it would be entertaining to run a competition called Hold Your Wii for a Wii. The rules were simple. The last person left standing without wetting themselves or vomiting would win a brand new Wii. Jennifer Strange won the competition, but a few hours later was dead. The coroner's verdict was death by water intoxication, a direct result of the competition. Now, 2 years later, a jury has awarded the family approximately $18 million, and a spokesperson for the station said they respected the jury's decision and hoped the award would help the family cope with its loss. After warning against scam sites offering Battlefield Bad Company 2 beta keys, it seems the gaming public will be getting the real deal sooner than expected. The full game isn't expected to launch until March next year, but sources hint that the beta might be available as early as the 19th of November. The legendary artist Don Ivan Punchets has died, aged 73. His work appeared everywhere from Playboy, National Geographic, Time magazine and Newsweek. For gamers though, he will best be remembered for his iconic work on id Software's Doom cover and promotional art. The art, featuring a solitary marine against the massed forces of hell, set the tone for a generation and helped make Doom one of the most influential games in history.
Good game. Round one.
I'm gonna button mash this wood in the face with my panda claws. Unnecessary extra punch to the face.
Final round. Fight.
Oh, what was that?
I've always been a fan of pandas. Panda's meant to beat logs.
Logwoman beats panda every time.
No, panda eats logs for breakfast. Eagle-eyed viewers will notice a discrepancy in what they've just seen. Yes, we're playing Tekken. Yes, we're playing it on a 360. No, we're not Elite Hacksaws. For the first time, Namco Bandai have released Tekken on both PS3 and 360.
Fight.
And the PS3 fanboys aren't happy. I'm not sure why. It's not like they're losing out in some way. You'd think it'd be a case of the more the merrier, wouldn't you?
This game is absolutely packed with playable characters. I counted 42 in total, including almost all of the Tekken 5 gang, as well as both the Bloodline Rebellion newbies. We talked to the director of the game about some of its new features when he was in town last week.
I'm
Katsuhiro Harada, the project lead for Tekken. I've been on the series for over 15 years now, and I do the overall direction of the game. Well, there's actually quite a lot of new features for Tekken 6. There's the rage system, the bound combo system, the interaction with the environment. All these are new features for the game. So everything was good about Tekken. We kind of took it a step even further and polished the gameplay. For example, the most easy to understand is if you look at the character select screen. There's 40 characters there on screen now. And not just the volume, but they're all unique in their own right.
Mastering the characters in this game takes a long time, so for the fans, this is a real long-term investment.
It's not just the characters, though. Mastering the subset moves like blocking, parries, and juggles is key to winning around, especially online. And I found that mastering those more advanced moves really lets you play mind games with your opponents.
That's the beauty of the Tekken series, though. It's easy to pick up and hammer the buttons for instant gratification, but mastery of the game is more difficult. practice mode really helps get the epic 10-hit combos locked down, although they're much harder to pull off in practice. All it takes is a sidestep or a block to mess it up.
You know what's not worth it? The campaign mode. The camera is just a pain, and the lock-on makes it really difficult to hit enemies. And the story just makes absolutely no sense. Something about an escaped robot trying to take down a corporation with a Naruto refugee, I think?
Yeah, the story is definitely the weakest part of the game. It's just a shame that's also where the most money is to be made. Pretty much everything you do here rewards cash prizes, and these can be used to buy new costume pieces, which either look awesome or give a nice boost to various stats.
Yeah, the stat boost can be great, and I like the semi-destructible sets and offline mode. Pile driving a guy's head so hard into the ground that it collapses beneath you feels pretty good. The combat on the whole is pretty meaty. You really do feel a good haymaker to the neck, but it does feel a little clunky when compared to Street Fighter 4, for example.
I can see why you say that. I mean, it is a bit more thoughtful than Street Fighter, but this is where the deeper strategies come in, and I love not having to hold back to block. No more walking backwards to save yourself from a pounding. Cancel a move to stop a punch, and you're ideally positioned to land a killer blow to end your opponent.
That is, unless you're the American guy, Bob.
I hope you're ready.
That dude is a pain to fight. He's pretty safe on blocks, whereas some characters really get punished for dodging an attack.
The biggest pain has to be arcade mode's end boss, Azazel. In true Tekken style, the rounds leading up to the final encounter aren't too hard, but he is a real nightmare, with huge AoE attacks and unblockable moves.
Yes, as I think this montage of pain demonstrates, he taught me a thing or two about manners. Why make it such a brutal fight? The difficulty goes from 6 to over 9,000. You could say it's Tekken the piss.
Thanks, Dad.
Thought it was funny.
Fight!
When Azazel gets too much, then you can try other play modes like Ghost and Survival. Getting to choose your next opponent at the end of Ghost is a nice touch.
I'm a big fan of survival mode. It makes me focus on my defensive game, which is something I don't normally worry about too much. The epic 8 vs 8 team mode can be hugely entertaining, especially when it's neck and neck all the way through. The campaign intro movie is overly long. I actually went and completed Tekkens 1 through 5, came back and still had time for tea. And, you know, even skipping through the consecutive 450 cutscenes just takes way too long. And I don't know about you, Hex, but I'm not getting any younger. Final thoughts?
I'm giving it a thoroughly respectable 7.5 rubber chickens.
The more I think about the campaign mode, the more upset I get. And the icing on this misery cake is that items you pick up are tied to the characters. Do you love it enough to play through it 42 times? I bet you don't. I'm giving it 6 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Good game.
We're still ploughing our way through the epic RPG that is Dragon Age Origins, and we'll bring you that full review next week. But to wet your dark fantasy whistle, we spoke to the co-founder of BioWare, the developer behind the game. Greg, thanks very much for joining us here on Good Game.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Does Dragon Age sit with past BioWare RPGs like Baldur's Gate, or would you say it's kind of a, I don't mean this in a bad way, but a less hardcore experience?
I would say that, you know, actually really what we set out to, I think what we accomplished with Dragon Age Origins was to really reflect the experience of Baldur's Gate. And I mean, Baldur's Gate, maybe in number 2 particularly. It's a very engaging game, very detailed. It's accessible though. I think that's one difference where the old games were pretty daunting and frightening to play. Whereas, I mean, the Dragon Age Origins, like, you know, detailed tutorial, teach you how to play the game, actually very good on console, feels very actiony. So really what we're trying to do with the game is in a sense introduce a broader audience to that sort of classic Baldur's Gate spiritual successor kind of thing.
Is there enough of the hardcore still there?
I think there's a fair amount of the hardcore, but that, again, that's not who all we're shooting at for this game. I mean, the key thing for it is it's anyone who loves a story is going to love Dragon Age Origins. I think that's one of the most impressive things about the game is that it's very deep, very detailed. There's a lot of really significant story in the game and actually a lot of interaction with your characters that are very involving, and it's actually quite interesting to actually just chat with everyone.
Yes, that's right. I stopped you to tell you that I'm an idiot. Whew! Thank the maker you know already. Now I can stop worrying I'll be found out.
I mean, a lot of the purpose behind the game was to challenge the player and put them in a difficult situation. I know I just spoke to someone who because we've been actually providing copies internally at EA, who played it a little while ago, and they said they frequently were walking around their house, like they're rubbing their temples, deciding what they were going to do, because it was just that challenging for them. I think when you manage to accomplish that, like they care enough about the characters and what's happening, I mean, that's when you've been successful. And like definitely with Dragon Age Origins, we've got a game that people will agonize over the difficult choices. You can be a bad guy, you can be very difficult and challenging everyone, but there has to be repercussions to that. It shouldn't be just you go scot-free. And again, that's one of the key things about the game is, and it's interesting because you actually can get certain things by being a bad guy that the good guys can't get, but vice versa. The good guys can get things you can't get. So you're always kind of balancing this, should I be bad here or good here, which is the better choice. Your party members will attack you and try and kill you at times in the game, depending on what choices you make. And suddenly things will happen in the game that are, an entire group will like be your enemy. There's like a lot of stuff that's like, I mean, the one that really struck me was the one time one of my guys attacked me because he said I was going too slow.
I'm here. I am not, however, unaware or outnumbered. Disappointed.
Does the Dragon Age story begin and end with what's on the disc, or is it going to be future expansions, DLC? What's
the story does begin on the disc, obviously, but ends well afterwards. There's an enormous amount of DLC. That's actually one of the fundamental things about Dragon Age is we're treating it as though it's a platform. So there's not only DLC that we're going to create and sell to fans, for quite a while. I think we're up to 2 years is what we're talking about. But there's also actually user-created content. There's a full user tool set available at launch that people can make their own stuff and actually we're going to make it available for folks on the PC. On the consoles, we're going to try and figure out a way to take the best of the PC-created DLC, but over to the PlayStation 3 and the 360. So, lots of big plans for that.
Lord Iduken, here in my booth? I am so...
He's fainted. You make quite the impression these days.
We created an entire community site that's actually about sharing your personal story for the game. We'll actually create a whole bunch of technology that will export out of the game into that site. And also an entire community site that will actually allow users who want to create content to find like-minded individuals and share their skills and create stuff. And because, nowadays in the world today, it's about being connected. It's not being disconnected and hiding out. And so we want to work on that, work that into the game and make it a fundamental part of the experience.
There's so much to talk about with this game, and we've been really impressed so far. It's about 10% action and 90% roleplay, but that's okay with us.
And Hex, I've learned something about dwarves that I never knew before, and that's that not only do they make excellent Patrick Stewart lookalikes, but they're also really bitchy.
Now then, you, get to the feast. I'd advise you to watch that tongue, dear sibling. Father will not live forever. Come, Balin.
It's very Melrose Place. We've had a lot of fun picking out the most offensive responses just to watch the claws come out.
Your Highness, allow me to kill this worm for his disrespect.
No, please,
There's a lot of politics in the dwarf origin story we've been playing through, and there's also plenty of wonderful fantasy to lose yourself in.
BioWare are known for their dialogue trees, but they really have evolved it into a new beast here. It's just so interesting the way that the choices you make actually reflect so seamlessly in future conversations, and the consequences carry more weight because you're closer to the story. And anyway, I could go on, but more next week.
Good game.
How would you feel if playing video games made you sick to your stomach? For a lot of gamers, this unfortunate situation is a reality. It's called virtual simulator sickness, and it can make playing video games a nauseating experience.
I started gaming when I was about 6 on the NES, and I used to play a lot of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Crackdown, Trog, and never had a problem with any of them. And then one fateful day, my brother brings home Brute Force for the Xbox. That's where it all began, really.
First started playing video games back in the 1970s. Bought my first PC, it was a Tandy TRS-80. I was playing a lot of the early Ultima games. And then in about 1990, I was introduced to a first-person shooter, Doom. And I then found myself getting very, very sick, very nauseous and very dizzy. And I then had to lie down because the sensation was that bad.
play games like brute force. Symptoms most commonly include nausea, headaches as well, and on the very rare occasion I will also suffer from dizziness.
More recently, the first-person shooter was about 5 or 6 years ago with a game called Serious Sam. If I gamed for only 10 minutes, it really would take me 2 hours to fully recover, and for the first hour, I would be very, very close to wanting to vomit.
I have felt like vomiting on one occasion only, and that was playing Half-Life 2. The thing about Half-Life 2 that made me feel so sick was Gordon Freeman walks really slow for me, and that makes me feel quite ill. And then he got on the watercraft as well, and that just did not sit well at all.
Virtual simulator sickness can be a huge problem for gamers. But what causes it? Dr. Manolio Kavakli from Macquarie University has been researching the disorder for a number of years, and she thinks she just might have the answer.
Simulator sickness is the discomfort that we experience when we are exposed to virtual worlds. The cause of simulator sickness is what you see with your eyes does not match what you expect to see in your brain. So if whatever you get as the sensory input doesn't match what you have stored in your memory as the motion model, then you are very likely to get the motion sick.
So is this your virtual reality lab?
Yes. We established the lab in 2003. We have a semi-cylindrical screen here, immersive screen.
So what kind of research do you do here?
We have, for example, developed a virtual roller coaster specifically to make people sick, because we wanted to find out what were the main reasons behind the motion sickness. What we have found was if the environment is too realistic or realistic enough, then generally people get sick, approximately 20%. So we try to combine all these findings together to be able to work out how not to make people so sick.
Okay, I've had enough. So, is there a cure for virtual simulator sickness? Or will motion sick gamers just have to stop playing?
Basically, I just adopted playing games that didn't cause the problem. I haven't actually considered medication to resolve the symptoms or anything like that. I've worked within my limitations, and I've just played games that worked for me, that didn't want to make me sick.
On some games, I can play through it. One game that I did persevere through to finish successfully was Deus Ex Invisible War, because it is the sequel to one of my favourite games, and I just couldn't leave it uncompleted. So BSS really isn't something that affects my enjoyability of gaming.
It was interesting to find out for us that when people are regularly exposed to playing computer games, they are less likely to get motion sick.
For someone who suffers from simulator sickness but also wants to play video games, what would you suggest that they do?
To play more games.
Good game.
If you've ever seen DJs in action, spinning records and playing with their knobs and pumping their hands in the air, you probably thought, hey, that's just turning records, I could do that.
And now you can. Well, you can pretend that you can.
Yes, the newest hero on the block is here, allowing gamers to add turntables to their ever-expanding list of fake instruments they can play.
Speaking of the instrument itself, I mean, yeah, it's pretty good. It's sturdy and it feels just right to play.
The game forces you to go through the tutorials, which I didn't actually mind because it's voiced by Grandmaster Flash himself.
Hey, it's your boy, DJ Grandmaster Flash, first DJ to make the turntables an instrument. So
anyone who's played Guitar Hero before will get the gist of this pretty quickly. There's 3 buttons on the vinyl, and these act as triggers for samples from each track in the mashup. But it's only the blue and green one that you'll need to hold down when performing scratches.
Come on, let's go.
Then there's the crossfader for switching between tracks. Spin the record back for a rewind to activate star power, and use Euphoria to boost the multiplier and put crossfading on autopilot. And that's it.
It's that simple. Come on.
The single player spares any lame premise of a story and just gives you a whole bunch of tracks to play. And some of them allow a friend to play along with a guitar as well. You can also take this head-to-head online, and we found most matches instantly with no lag at all.
I found the real challenge comes in working the crossfader. It takes quite a bit of practice to flick it back and forth at speeds. Also, the directional scratches on Expert and Hard add a fair bit to the challenge.
You know, at times I felt like I was actually DJing, and I know that's crap because records don't have buttons on them, for example, but still.
I don't know, that part was a bit of a letdown for me. I mean, there were times when I did feel like a real DJ, and while I wasn't expecting the experience to be exactly the same, I was disappointed that they went with the same thing as all the other hero titles, you know, just pushing buttons. It seemed like a bit of a wasted opportunity, you know? I mean, I was really looking forward to trying out my mixmaster skills, but the most creative freedom you get in this game is dropping out the bass or treble, or maybe throwing in a few Flavor Flav samples for the hell of it.
And I got numb. Can I tell them that I really never had a gun? But it's the wax that the Terminator X fun. Now they got me in the yeah, boy!
Well, fair enough, Hex, but I enjoyed what they did here. It gives you a sense of being talented even though you're completely talentless, and after 4 years of playing guitar, it was nice to have a new take on the formula.
Yeah, it was a bit of fun, but let's talk about the actual music.
Indeed. The set list here is huge, with over 100 tracks mixed and mashed into 93 original mashups, with a few unedited classics in there for good measure. Most of the mixes are from developers, but you can see there's a lot of love here, with original performance from DJing royalty like DJ Shadow and Grandmaster Flash. I enjoyed more or less playing every song on offer here. Even the ones I hated were fun to play.
Alright, stop. Collaborate and listen. Ice is back with a brand new invention. Something grabs a hold of me tightly. Flow like a harpoon day and night.
Well, for me, the music was a weak point. If you do the maths, then 100 songs mashed up into 93 means that quite a few of the songs are going to be used 2 or 3 times. And I found most of the mixes pretty forgettable. I think this is the first time we've had a major disagreement badge.
Well, yeah, music is always going to be down to personal preference, and for me I found the cheesiness to be kind of add a playfulness to the music that you just don't get with original tracks. But I guess if the thought of a David Bowie and Marvin Gaye mashup is exciting to you, then you will like this, but for most people I think that may be some sort of musical monstrosity. Like I said, personal preference.
One thing I definitely didn't like is that you can't fail. I mean, that kind of takes away the challenge.
I disagree. The challenge is definitely here, and the game gets insane on Expert. I'd even venture a guess that it's actually harder than actually DJing. At least in DJing, you don't have buttons on your disc and you're spinning your record with the buttons, furiously tapping.
The button tapping. It's like they want you to tap as fast as any note stream you've ever seen, and on a moving platform. Also, you progress through your career by unlocking stars, which then just encourages you to breeze through on medium so you can unlock everything.
Yeah, but you can't fail, so you're not scared to jump in on Expert and just give it a crack. I'd even say I had more fun with it on the harder settings, even though I was pretty crap. I don't know what it is, but I loved playing with this thing, and I think it taps into that part of your brain that loves playing with switches.
Well, I did have some fun here, but I don't see myself going back to this. I'm sure the rhythm game lovers will find something to love, but it just wasn't as fun as Guitar Hero, and the music certainly didn't do it for me. I'm giving it 6.5.
I see your point, but I still had quite a lot of fun here, and I just hope the sequel has some Fatboy Slim in it. I'm giving it 8.5 out of 10.
Good game.
Aww, thump him! Thump him!
He doesn't actually get hurt, though.
Need a hammer or something?
He just jumps out of the way.
This is iPad for the PS3, and it's kind of like an upgraded Tamagotchi, where you have your own pet, you need to look after it and feed it and clean it and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how this would be good for people who can't have pets, but the interface isn't really as simple as it looks.
And for a game where you have to interact with the camera so much, you actually have to use the controller for quite a lot of it.
Plus, it's really laggy, and the mirror image from the camera makes it really confusing to work out where on the screen you want to be touching.
If it was just a bit more sensitive or responsive, I think it could be really fun, but I just didn't like it very much, to be honest.
So did you guess the game for this week?
Veteran gamers wouldn't have had any problems spotting Killer Instinct, which punched its way out of arcades and onto SNES way back in 1995.
Developed by Rare, the brains behind N64's GoldenEye, the game was a smash hit despite playing a lot like 93's Mortal Kombat. It even had its own interpretation of the fatality, the slightly less catchy No Mercy.
Next week, we return to our chairs for the full review of Dragon Age Origin.
Let's get back to it. My fighting arm's twitching.
Plus Super Mario Bros. Wii.
Digital distribution has changed the way we buy and play games, and we meet some of the leading experts in the field.
Plus, ahead of Modern Warfare 2, we take a look at the Call of Duty franchise in backwards compatible.
Modern Warfare 2! Until next week, gamers, Bajo out.
Hex out.
Look at him, he's filthy, and you've given him all these biscuits. It's unhealthy for him. I'm going to report you to VRSPCA.